Vancouver News.
But we need to take more action now.
Masks mandatory, social gatherings banned, sweeping new measures to control COVID-19 in BC. Also,
we have no problem turning off in-person services.
faith services suspended, a ban on high-risk indoor group fitness activities, and
business-wise, that's going to be a challenge for Whistler.
BC's tourism industry reeling as health officials strongly urge people not to travel.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. BC is bringing in sweeping new measures to control COVID-19, including mandatory masks. The so-called social lockdown is now province-wide and extends into December. And high-risk indoor group fitness activities are suspended. Our Zara Premji is here live tonight with more on the restrictions, a long list of them from Dr. Bonnie Henry today, Zara. So let's start with her flip-flop on masks.
Mike, you're right. A lot of change for our province right now. And important to note, they go into effect as of midnight tonight and carry through to December 7th at midnight. So like you said, starting with masks. Masks are now mandatory in all indoor public and retail spaces for staff and customers, except of course if you're eating or drinking. So if you're serving a customer behind plexiglass and you are alone behind that glass, you can then remove your mask. But if you're in a place like a bank and others are with you behind that barrier, your face covering must remain on. There are some exceptions to the order, though.
Again, this does not apply to anyone who is unable to put on or remove the mask on their own. We know that there are people with certain conditions and disabilities in some ways that would make mask wearing challenging. It does not apply to children under the age of 2.
But at school, masks will still not be mandated. Dr. Henry says schools are not public, open places you can walk into whenever you want. She says much like not needing a mask at your workstation, you should not need one at your desk at school. But in common areas, it is expected. Mike.
So pretty much everywhere. So beyond masks, what other orders can we expect to come into effect tonight?
Well, there are several other avenues Dr. Henry created orders for and others she set expectations for. So first, let's run through the orders and the main orders first. Well, all community and social events are suspended as of midnight tonight for the next 2 weeks, even if they were serving under 50 people. Now, this includes in-person faith and religious services being suspended. However, exemptions will be made for time-sensitive events like funerals and weddings or baptisms, but they must be limited to 10 people and no gathering or receptions prior to or even after the event. When it comes to sports, no spectators will be allowed at any indoor or outdoor sport. Now, Mike, you mentioned high-risk indoor fitness being suspended as well. Not all activities are included, only those health officials consider to be high risk. Now, this includes spin, high-intensity interval training or HIIT classes, and hot yoga. Now, we spoke to someone, or Dr. Henry rather, who says if you were given approval over the last few days, that approval is rescinded. Now, I spoke to a spin studio owner who will follow all the public health orders, of course, but expressed frustrations with the process up until now.
I feel for sure sad about the news for our industry and a bit frustrated to be labeled as dangerous because our most important element of our business model is the health and safety of our client base. So that's definitely tough to hear.
Now, on those expectations from Dr. Henry, she is confirming the Premier's message from Wednesday on travel within the province as well as outside, strongly urging the community not to travel outside of your jurisdictions. So, for example, someone from Fraser Health not heading to Whistler on a ski trip, but it's not an order. She says she trusts people will obey this and only travel if considered essential. So a lot to wrap your head around, Mike, but Henry says it will carry on until December 7th at midnight in hopes of reflattening the curve once again. Mike.
All right, Zara, thanks very much. Zara Premji with us live tonight. And as Zara explained there, part of today's announcement was to limit non-essential travel. That has big implications for ski towns and others that are just opening up for the season. Our Tina Lovegreen is live in Whistler tonight. Tina, it's already been a tough go for businesses there. How are people feeling?
Yeah, Mike, it's certainly not the news you want to hear when you're a place that heavily relies on tourism. As Zara mentioned there, Dr. Bonnie Henry was asked today, if you have a trip planned, a vacation planned to Whistler with your family this weekend, what do you do? And her recommendation was to postpone it. And that's exactly it. These are recommendations, not an order, but still it comes at a tough time. Vail Resorts here is preparing for their grand opening for the ski season this Thursday, and they tell me they're still planning to go ahead, but a lot of concern from businesses here. And I spoke to the co-owner of Purebred, and he says he's of two minds. On the one hand, he wants everyone to be safe. He wants to see those case numbers go down, but he's also relying on those tourists for his business. So his hope really is that people limit their travel, stick to these restrictions just for the next 2 weeks so it doesn't spill over into Christmas and really damage business.
Whistler is a town that relies on those other than the people that live here. It really does need to have either international tourists, which has been restricted for many, many months now, but if without those, it really relies on lower mainland people coming up here. And without that, it's going to be an incredible struggle for businesses in this town. We're not able to rely on just the community to survive.
And many businesses here are already feeling the pinch. It is quite quiet here in the village tonight. It was quiet this morning, but there are a lot of COVID safety protocols here in place. There's hand sanitization stations around the village. There are posters every few steps you take here reminding you that here in Whistler, we wear masks. That's what the posters say. And people here are quite accustomed to wearing masks. I've seen it, even though they're outdoors and there's quite a lot of space, everyone is wearing a mask, but businesses are still suffering. I've spoken to hotels who say they've already seen cancellations. First, it started with the international travelers, and now it seems to be everyone.
We're getting more of the Quebec and Ontario market are canceling. This week I saw a lot of BC cancellations coming through. Just people are nervous and uncertain. We have a very flexible cancellation policy. It used to be 60 days.
And Tina, you said you have seen a lot of people actually wearing masks, but how do they feel about a mask mandate there?
Yeah, a lot of the businesses here are actually quite happy about it. A lot of them already require customers and their employees to wear masks. And I said there are signs everywhere here that say, here in Whistler, we wear masks. And a lot of people are accustomed to it. So I think the behavior and the habits around mask wearing has definitely changed here. Mike?
All right, Tina Lovegreen live in Whistler tonight. Thanks. As we mentioned, there's been really no indication of COVID-19 spread slowing down in BC, as our province is once again seeing record case numbers. And unfortunately, another person has died, bringing the total to 321. Hospitalizations are up to a record high of 217. The number of people in intensive care is also up. Active cases are also at a record high, just over 6,900. The number of people under active public health monitoring is now nearing 10,000. Some good news, 538 new cases since yesterday's update, if we can call that good news, but that is the fewest number in the past 8 days. 57% of those cases are in the Fraser Health region. Well, COVID-19 has forced many of us to change the way we go about our daily lives. The pandemic has made even usual gatherings that follow a death dangerous. Now, a Vancouver walking program that helps people handle grief is in jeopardy due to concerns over the spread of the virus. As Belle Puri reports, those dealing with the loss of a loved one now also face isolation.
On a blustery, wet day, there's warmth and comfort in a walk along the water.
I come here for support.
Noel Baxter's husband died almost 2 years ago.
He was one of a kind. I had a wonderful life with him.
When missing him became too much, a family doctor recommended Noel join this specialized walking group.
You think you're all alone. You're the only person in this situation, but no.
Once a week, she meets others who have lost a loved one. They walk, talk, and share feelings. These bereavement walks are facilitated by Vancouver Hospice Society volunteers trained to help in the grieving process.
To be able to basically listen, because that's really the most important part of the program, is to be a person listening and giving the grieving person the opportunity to express that loss.
The walks have been well received and attended for over 15 years. The process of grieving that starts with a funeral or similar gathering, of course, doesn't end there. Now that the pandemic has made it nearly impossible for people to gather, bereavement walks have become more important, but their future is in question. The walks have now been suspended due to the dramatic spike in COVID numbers and in light of provincial health orders for people not to congregate, even though the guidelines do allow for support groups to continue.
But we just felt sort of out of an abundance of caution at this time, it was best for us just to pause these walks.
Even with mask and distancing protocols in place, the emotional nature of the outing makes it hard for people to stay apart.
Unlike the other social gathering, it is quite naked life to life. They're so truthful.
It's often friends and family who maybe haven't walked this walk, metaphorically speaking, don't realize that sometimes your whole social structure has to change. And that's hard.
While many things have changed during the pandemic, one remains constant. People continue to lose loved ones, perhaps more than ever. And grieving in isolation makes it that much harder. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
A group representing seniors care providers in BC has released a report looking into the response to seniors care during the pandemic. And they've prepared several recommendations to try to protect residents and staff as the second wave of COVID-19 hits our province. Despite strong measures already implemented by the Ministry of Health, the BC Care Providers Association says more can be done to improve the lives of seniors and caregivers. For seniors, they're calling for rapid testing protocols and the need to protect seniors' quality of life. And for workers, the organization says better funding and pandemic pay is needed, along with mental health and safety programs to ease employee burnout. The organization is calling on family caregivers, staff, government, public health officials, and labor unions to embrace the recommendations. To the far north now, where Yukon has also announced new restrictions. It's also ending the so-called BC territory mobility bubble. Philippe Morin tells us more about how it'll affect travel.
It used to be that Yukon and BC had an exemption, a free travel zone where people could visit without quarantine. Not anymore.
As of Friday, November 20th, anyone entering into the Yukon will be required to self-isolate for 14 days.
Even with that new requirement, there's more. Today, the Premier asked Yukoners to cancel any plans for non-essential travel. He also asked Yukoners to limit their travel within the territory.
At this time, our government does not recommend non-essential travel outside of the territory.
The move comes as BC has seen a record-breaking number of cases, and Yukon has seen cases steadily climb. The latest case in Yukon, announced last night, is being investigated. There are 6 locations in Whitehorse flagged for potential spread. Today, the Premier said that containing the virus requires these new measures, even if it will have an effect on businesses and families.
The new cases we have seen in Yukon recently, combined with the dramatic increases in cases in Nunavut and British Columbia and across the country, made this a very necessary decision.
The restriction doesn't affect everyone. People transiting through Yukon, from the mainland U.S. to Alaska, will still be able to do so, provided they stay on their route and move quickly enough. Essential workers are also exempt from the self-quarantine, as are people in communities like Atlin and Lower Post BC, which are right on the border. There's also an exemption for transboundary First Nations. As for how long these measures will stay in effect, we don't know, and neither does the Yukon's Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Given the increasing risk of multiple cases or outbreaks in Yukon and the increasing case activity in BC, I therefore gave my recommendations to Cabinet yesterday. That government consider suspending the BC bubble until such a time as we see cases in BC stabilize. We will need to get to a point that we are once again comfortable, that cases are contained, and the curve is once more flattened.
Philippe Morin reporting from Yukon tonight. Well, Surrey RCMP has arrested a 19-year-old man and seized multiple doses of illicit drugs believed to be linked to recent overdoses in that city. The man was arrested in Langley this afternoon. Police believe blue and purple fentanyl seized from the man are potentially lethal and warn drug users against consuming them. 3 people died of suspected overdoses in 12 hours in Surrey. RCMP stressed that it's dangerous to use non-prescription drugs purchased from unregulated sources. Users are encouraged to follow safety measures like not using alone and being careful about dosage size. WorkSafe BC and the RCMP are investigating a death at a cement plant in Richmond this morning. Lafarge Canada says the fatal accident happened at its plant on River Road. It's not yet clear what happened, but police say the facility was evacuated afterward. The Mounties Serious Crime Unit is involved. And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. First check of the forecast. Last night, right about this time, you had a tarp out, an umbrella, staff of many trying to keep you dry. Not tonight, though.
No, we've just got some very light showers and some misting. In fact, it was dry and you can even see some breaks in the clouds, but I'm starting to see things fill in on the radar. Nice start to the day, though. Let me take you to the current temperatures right now. It is a little chilly out there before I get to the radar. 6 right now up towards Sunshine Coast, 7 at YVR, and temperatures are about this for the next couple of days. Seasonal afternoon highs, and will stay fairly mild through the overnight. Looking at the radar, we do have a cell filling in through East Van, so look for showers to ramp up in the next couple of hours. The showers that we're getting, though, over the next 48 hours really coming in sort of pinwheel lines, so getting some sunshine in between those rounds of rain. In fact, this morning, gorgeous round of sunshine across Metro Vancouver for those up early. A little more than even I expected, but don't you hate it when you say there won't be as much sun as you actually get? Yes, that's the right way to do a wrong forecast. Showers are in the forecast right through to Saturday, but I do think things are trending drier on Saturday. And this pinwheely, tough forecast gets a little easier as we head into Sunday and a bigger system moves in. But I have a lot of sunshine in the long, long range. Those details coming up, Mike.
We'll look forward to the long range. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you in a bit. And a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Results of an investigation into sexual harassment and discrimination within the RCMP were released today. Just ahead, the troubling findings and the reaction. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, our colleagues at CBC Marketplace have been looking into the booming business of overseas puppy mills. Many dogs have been flown to Canada over the past several months, filling the pandemic demand. But veterinary organizations are worried. As David Common reports, they're warning Canadians about the number of puppies arriving and the health of the animals.
At the country's busiest airport, a lucrative cargo just arrived.
David, anybody else on the radio?
Yeah, I'm in the parking lot just above the Turkish cargo.
Inside those crates, up to 70 puppies arriving from Eastern Europe, part of a regular trade worth millions of dollars.
It's easier to bring a dog in than a case of beer.
Dr. Scott Weiss is a veterinary professor studying puppy importation.
Do you know how many puppies come into this country?
Well, we know it's in the thousands. How many thousands is it? We just have no idea.
And neither does the federal government. It clears those puppies on arrival, but has no database to know who imports them or how many even arrive. They're often listed online, selling for thousands of dollars.
Sorry, where did she come from? She's from Ukraine.
We took our hidden cameras to see who is selling, amid alerts from veterinary experts that imported dogs often carry parasites, viruses, and other life-threatening conditions.
Is it healthy and everything? Yeah, like custom clear him. Then like, you have to like visit the vet like at the custom.
Well, it cleared all the Canadian rules and it got through customs without realizing that there really aren't any. The dog was alive. That's pretty much the bare minimum to get through it.
And that, says Dr. Weiss, needs to change.
Abby.
Hi.
Professional dog handler Abby Lorenzen, who witnessed 38 dead dogs arrive on a flight to Canada this summer, wants the feds to take action.
These mass importations of animals for resale for nothing but the almighty dollar, it has to stop.
The CFIA, which regulates animal imports, says it's up to the buyer to ask key questions to avoid supporting puppy mills. Back in July, they paused the import of puppies under 8 months of age from Ukraine and say there have been no significant transport incidents since that ban. David Common, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can watch the full investigation of overseas puppy mills on CBC Marketplace tomorrow at 8 p.m. We'll be back in a few moments with more national and international news, including the latest on COVID-19 from across the country. Stay with us.
Join us. Virtually, of course.
For open house in your house.
December 4th.
Book a time.
And chat with us.
CBC personalities
around the province.
Head to cbc.ca/foodbank day to sign up today.
A toxic culture rife with harassment and assault. That is how a former Supreme Court justice is describing the RCMP tonight. Michelle Bastard released a report in the wake of the force's historic sexual harassment settlement. As Ashley Burke tells us, Bastard was shocked by what he heard, and a warning you may find it disturbing as well.
She finished her career as one of the RCMP protecting former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. But in the years leading up to that, she says she was tormented by her male co-workers.
The sexual assaults, the inadvertent tearing my top open and reaching in and grasping me by my breast, things like that. There's so many. You could go on and on and on.
Linda Gillis Davidson spent almost 30 years on the force, leaving in 2012. She says she dealt with demeaning comments, unwanted grabbing, and crude pranks.
They had actually taken tampons and dipped them in ketchup and hung them from the coat hangers.
Davidson was one of the lead plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit at the center of a new damning report. It's filled with hundreds of other women's haunting accounts. The report, written by former Supreme Court Justice Michelle Bastard, states, the level of violence and sexual assault that was reported was shocking. We heard stories of women who sat with their service revolvers in their mouths and were only stopped from killing themselves when they thought of their children or their pets.
If an organization cannot keep its own members safe from harassment and discrimination, how can Canadians have confidence in them to keep them safe as they enforce the law?
When Trudeau hired RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, her mandate was to change the culture of harassment. It's something Lucki says she's experienced herself.
It's touched me very personally, and actually today has been a very emotional day. But this is exactly why I took on this job. It's really just deepening my resolve to do better, and it's putting fuel in my fire.
Lucki says change is hard, but it is happening. The report's key recommendation is an independent review into the future of the RCMP, something that no one's committed to yet. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Some students in Ontario stayed away from class today, both virtual and in person. They want to draw attention to a problem they say they face at their Catholic schools. CBC's Deanna Simonatic-Johnson looks at what the students are doing about anti-Black racism.
Selena Osunde is a good student who doesn't like missing class, but today she's doing it for a cause.
To really stand up for, racist issues that happen in school.
Students like Osunde say these incidents happen daily, and the administrators of the Your Catholic District School Board are doing nothing about it.
Whether it's a white teacher asking, "Oh, is your hair real?" or, "Oh, I know you probably only have, your mom in your household."
The Strike for Change is a brainchild of an organization, Students Speak Up, started by York Catholic alumni. The social media account gives students a space to post allegations of racism in schools anonymously. Stories like a teacher using the N-word and saying he was allowed to do so as a historian. A cafeteria section where many Black students sit being called Cafrica.
So the fact that they have a page to speak up or to message someone privately and say that, you know what, you had an experience with this teacher, I also had that experience with that teacher. There's power in that. That's mobilization.
As Black Lives Matter protests spread around North America, so too have demonstrations for equality within schools. But now it's not the adults, but the students themselves who are leading the charge, as they did in Calgary last month after a principal was found to be using a racial slur.
They are asserting their ideas, they're asserting themselves, and the fact that we are expected to respond, they're expecting a response.
In a response to CBC News, your Catholic District School Board stressed its commitment to fighting anti-Black racism. Through unlearning and learning, our goal is to help our school communities begin to move forward toward greater understanding, mutual support, and healing.
There's definitely some anxieties for some students.
The student strikes organizers say their top demand is for a mechanism for clear reporting of race-based incidents. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The federal government tabled legislation today intended to get Canada to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But it didn't bind the current government to any target during its mandate. The CBC's Salima Shivji looks at the plan and the reaction.
Achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions.
It's a promise the Liberals made more than a year ago. On the campaign trail, as they position themselves as the party to lead Canada on climate action.
We'll legislate 5-year targets along the way.
Clear targets to reduce Canada's carbon emissions enshrined in law, to compel this government and future ones to meet their climate goals. The bill also sets up an independent advisory board for advice on how to get there.
On a rolling basis, every 5 years between 2030 and 2050.
But the legislation would start those legally binding targets 10 years from now. And if the government fails to meet a target, there aren't any penalties, even though Canada has never once met any of the emissions reduction commitments it has set and is not on track to meet its current one.
Why did you not include more accountability in your climate accountability bill?
There is a tremendous amount of transparency and accountability required, but ultimately the accountability for government's actions or inactions is from Canadians themselves.
Not good enough, say some environmentalists, even as they applaud the Liberals for tabling landmark legislation. They'd like to see it amended to make the eventual law stronger.
Who among us thinks out to 2030 on a regular basis? But most of us have plans for what we're going to be doing in 2025, and that's what we need the government to have as well.
The minority Liberals will need the support of at least one opposition party to pass this bill. And all eyes now are on when the government will release their short-term plan to meet their climate promises for 2030. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
There is growing concern right across Canada about the current surge of COVID-19 cases and the difficulty in stopping it. That is several jurisdictions stepping up restrictions like BC. Manitoba is taking drastic new action, even though the province is already under the tightest restrictions in the country.
Some Manitobans and unfortunately some retailers as well are going against the spirit of those rules, and thus they are creating a greater risk to public safety. That is why today we are here to discuss new and stricter measures.
Starting tomorrow, Manitobans will be forbidden from having visitors in their homes except for necessary support services. And starting Saturday, retailers will be prohibited from selling non-essential items in stores. Ontario also cracking down. Today, the Premier announcing new enforcement measures and said new restrictions are coming tomorrow. Quebec's Premier said family gatherings would be allowed at Christmas this year, but only if citizens stay in their homes for 1 week before and after. He also said winter break for some schools will be extended with online learning instead. It all comes as hospital ICUs there are being stretched to the limit in many regions. Healthcare experts say the spread of COVID is expected to get worse through the winter if the further measures aren't put in place. And new COVID modeling numbers from Canadian public health officials will come out tomorrow. But tonight, CBC News has an early look, and those numbers are startling. If Canadians maintain our current number of contacts, daily infection numbers could still quadruple. David Thurton broke this story for us tonight and shows us why staying the course just isn't an option.
Fires are burning in so many different areas.
The warnings have been clear.
But we have to do our part to flatten the curve before it gets any worse.
And now a grim reality. CBC News has learned new federal modeling will suggest if Canadians keep doing what they're doing now, we're on track to see over 20,000 cases a day by mid-December. And if we increase the current number of people we contact each day, daily infections could surge to 3 times that.
You hear a number like 60,000 new cases per day. I mean, that's an overwhelming number. But even if we maintain the status quo, that's still not acceptable.
For the first time, the Prime Minister met with all the opposition leaders for an advance briefing before the numbers are made public.
This is an incredibly urgent situation. It is one that we do not have a handle on.
The fact that the numbers are really troubling. I'm deeply worried about people.
Under these models, even staying the course will have dangerous repercussions for the healthcare system.
Many places, for example, are starting to cancel elective surgeries. And, even maintaining 20,000 new cases per day is not sustainable.
To drive that number under 10,000 cases a day, experts say Canadians need to limit interactions to essential activities and adhere to physical distancing rules. On Friday, the Prime Minister will speak about these new forecasts from the steps of his home. He hasn't addressed Canadians from there since Canada was in its first wave, a sign of the urgency of his message. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
A program at the Montreal General Hospital is helping patients adjust to life after a stay in the intensive care unit. Whether it's from COVID-19 or a severe accident, without proper follow-up, physical and psychological problems can persist. As Leah Hendry explains, the program makes sure patients know they aren't alone.
4 months ago, Gilles Crusette didn't know if he'd be able to walk his dogs again. Last July, the 54-year-old took a bad fall on his bike coming down a steep hill near his house. He wasn't wearing a helmet and suffered a serious head injury. He spent nearly 2 weeks in the intensive care unit at the Montreal General Hospital and is lucky to be alive.
It takes discipline, right?
Although he's back home, his recovery isn't over. He still needs therapy to improve his stamina, motor skills, and speech.
Psychologically, that's the hardest part, to realize that it's gonna take much more time than I thought.
But Crusette is reassured by the support he's received from the McGill University Health Centre's Critical Illness Recovery Program. The program was started by Dr. David Hornstein, an ICU specialist who always wondered what happened to people after they left the ICU.
It was clear to me that there was a big uphill battle they had to face, and we never saw any of that.
Patients can struggle with physical weakness or memory issues. Nightmares, flashbacks, sleep problems, and PTSD symptoms are also common in the weeks following an ICU stay.
We felt that the people in the ICU who understand, who work there, who know what it is, who kind of get it, need to be the people that see these patients downstream.
Now, about 6 to 8 weeks after the patient is discharged, a team of doctors, nurses, and respiratory therapists from the ICU follow up. During the patient's assessment, the team looks for any lingering issues or complications. If necessary, an evaluation may be arranged with a specialist, like a physiotherapist, speech pathologist, or psychologist. The recovery team can be a bridge between the hospital and the patient's family doctor or pharmacist. The program also includes a peer support group. Just listening and sharing similar experiences can help validate how patients are feeling. The benefits for the patients are obvious, but their feedback helps the medical staff improve too.
Everything you do, there is an impact on the patient. So it can be as simple as turning the patient. You just have to tell them.
Crusette is grateful for the attention he's getting in the program. Knowing a team of medical professionals have his back makes his road to recovery easier. Leah Hendry, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, from hand sanitizer to toilet paper, Canadians have been complaining about pandemic price gouging. A CBC Marketplace investigation is next.
The information superhighway is taking a detour away from the town of Oliver, BC. A controversial internet service provider has decided to shut down and will no longer provide service to racist and neo-Nazi groups. The CBC's Deborah Goebel has the details.
In the small town of Oliver, residents were relieved by the news.
Great, terrific.
We don't need any trash like that on the internet.
Their brief reputation as the hate capital of Canada has ended. Ended because Bernard Klatt is no longer in the internet business. As owner of a highly controversial internet service provider, Klatt had been the target of human rights organizations. Fairview Technology Centre had provided a forum for racist and white supremacist groups. One of their websites called Hitler an Aryan hero, another called the Holocaust a joke. But Klatt maintained he wasn't doing anything wrong.
I make no apologies for the content of our subscribers' web pages.
Klatt wouldn't be interviewed about his sudden decision to shut down the internet service, but in this email he denies political pressure prompted the move. Instead, he says, "We found that the new BC Tel contract had language in it that required us to be financially and legally liable for anything posted to the internet by our subscribers." And that was a risk he was obviously not prepared to take.
The citizens of Oliver, the mayor of Oliver, the businesses in Oliver provided an example to the whole of the country.
The dial-up customers that FTC had will be taken over by another internet provider in the Okanagan, but it was quick to say it would not be hosting any of Klatt's website customers.
It's not our policy to do that kind of thing, and Bernard knew that. When he came to us, that was not our policy, and so there wasn't really an issue with us taking him on.
Bernard Klatt will continue to run the computer business he operates out of his home here in Oliver. As for his neighbors, well, they're looking forward to regaining their reputation as the grape capital of Canada. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Oliver, BC.
The scene was BC Telephone's headquarters building at Kingsway and Boundary in Burnaby. The guard and his partner were taking a quantity of money to the Bank of Montreal branch on the 4th floor of the building. They were ambushed inside by 2 men. It's believed there was a struggle and that the guard was wounded in the stomach by a bullet fired from his own weapon. He was rushed to Burnaby General Hospital and at last word was responding to treatment. Burnaby RCMP and Vancouver Police Squad cars surrounded the BC Tel building within minutes. The tracking dogs were brought in, but it was quickly determined that the hold-up suspects had escaped, likely down the elevator and through the underground area. A car reported stolen this morning was apparently used in the getaway.
One vehicle is described as a black Toyota hatchback. Second vehicle is described as a Cordova.
Our top story tonight on CBC Vancouver News, a new mask mandate in BC. Dr. Bonnie Henry and the provincial government expanding the list of restrictions as COVID-19 extends its spread among our communities. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first more on our case numbers today. BC once again seeing new records set, and unfortunately another person has died, bringing the total to 321. Hospitalizations are up to a record high of 217. The number of people in intensive care is at 59. Active cases are also at a record high, just over 6,900. The number of people under active public health monitoring is now nearly 10,000. Some good news. There were 538 new cases since yesterday's update. That is the fewest in the last 8 days. 57% of those cases are in the Fraser Health region. As mentioned, the provincial government is expanding its list of restrictions and guidance on preventing COVID-19 spread. And as Briar Stewart explains, some of them are the toughest we've seen yet.
Many business owners had been pleading for a mask order as some customers were still turning up without them.
If it's mandatory by BC, then we can strictly enforce the law and stop the person at the door.
Now they will be mandatory, and social gatherings will be restricted across the entire province.
But we need to take more action now.
The province has also ordered places of worship to no longer hold gatherings inside, except for weddings and funerals where there can be a maximum of 10. While there hasn't been any reported COVID cases at this synagogue, there have been at other religious gatherings.
They did say that the spread of the virus has become exponential, and they really need to get ahead of this before the hospital system is overwhelmed. And we're very on side with ensuring that safety is a priority.
The province is going to step up enforcement, including at pubs and restaurants, to make sure they're following the rules. But many fitness facilities remain closed. The province considers intense group activities like spin class high risk, so they will stay shuttered.
We are in our second surge.
Others may be able to reopen, but they need to submit a new safety plan, and they're still waiting for the guidelines.
Stretch is a business that employs 19 people. My partner and I, we've been working, without any wages, collecting our CERB, with the hope that in the future we'll have a business to come back to.
Another area health officials are very worried about is the number of COVID cases within care facilities. Despite the measures already taken, there are nearly 60 active outbreaks. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, thousands of Canadians have been complaining about price gouging for all kinds of pandemic essentials, from hand sanitizer to toilet paper. Asha Tomlinson and our CBC Marketplace team have been investigating.
We need the products, but
many Canadians say they're being gouged when they shop for essentials.
The toilet paper rolls that we can get for $8, I kid you not, we're looking at prices of upwards of $32.
I think it's kind of ridiculous how far price gouging has really gone.
The same products come up again and again at most of the big chains. Disinfectant wipes, toilet paper, hand sanitizer.
Your raw material to make the actual formulation has skyrocketed.
Paul Kodrish manufactures medical-grade hand sanitizer. He says price markups should be no more than 30%. We show him what we find.
$9.99, 8 ounce.
Infuriates me.
Infuriating why?
Because it's gouging.
This is 1 liter,
yep.
$34.99.
Yep.
On store shelves, your product.
Yep. That's unacceptable.
Canada's premiers promise to crack down on price gouging, from Jason Kenney to John Horgan to Doug Ford.
You're hiking the price 5 times, 10 times what it should be. You're done, you're gone.
But there's still no law that limits how much prices can go up.
I'm hoping someone does something to take a stand against it.
Quebec's Consumer Protection wanted an investigation. The government said no. Alberta and BC tell us it's really hard to define price gouging. Ontario says it'll keep an eye on the situation. As for the retailers, they say product shortages, their suppliers, fluctuating exchange rates, and shipping costs are all reasons for higher prices.
All of those things add to the cost.
Meantime, Kodrish is taking action. He stopped selling to the distributor that he says overpriced his product.
I don't think in a time of crisis that you need to make the same margin you've made in the past.
Asha Tomlinson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, hurricanes are becoming more intense and creating more rainfall nowadays because of climate change. Up next, Johanna Wagstaffe shows us another phenomenon also now being associated with these powerful storms. And at 6:43, a live look at Science World tonight. Yes, the sun did pop out for a while this morning, but the rain rolled right back in again. Is it here for a while? We'll find out as the Johanna Wagstaffe Show continues next.
The Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates.
Rebate.
Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
What remains of Hurricane Iota that slammed into Central America 3 days ago is now drifting toward the Pacific Ocean. In its wake, devastation and death in some of the world's most impoverished places. Wide-scale flooding in Honduras forced families there to flee. More than 24 were confirmed dead by last night. That includes 5 members of one family buried alive when a landslide swept away their home. The full extent of the impact isn't clear because many regions are still cut off by washed-out roads. At full force, Iota directly hit Nicaragua, bringing mass destruction there. Torrential rainfall in this La Niña year is expected to trigger more flooding and mudslides across that region and into South America. Well, hurricanes, as we just saw with Iota, are becoming more intense and dropping more rainfall than before, all because of climate change. Our Johanna Wagstaffe tells us about a new study released by a Japanese university which shows these powerful storms may be taking longer to wind down once they hit land.
Hurricanes are some of the most intense weather systems this planet has to offer. And because of climate change, they're becoming more intense, dropping more rainfall, are forming in areas they didn't used to, and are rapidly intensifying at alarming speeds. And now, we're learning that they also may be taking longer to wind down once they do hit the coast. This new study from scientists at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology shows that hurricanes are staying stronger for longer once they make landfall, which means they're extending their damaging path farther inland. The team analyzed all landfalling storms in the North Atlantic Basin from 1967 to 2018. And they found a slower rate of hurricane decay since they're now holding on to more moisture picked up from warmer sea surface temperatures. In fact, hurricanes during the course of the first 24 hours after landfall are weakening almost twice as slowly now than they did 50 years ago. Computer model simulations of hurricanes showed that additional moisture is most likely the main cause for these trends. The team created computer simulations of 4 different hurricanes and then set different temperatures for the surface of the sea. Once each virtual hurricane reached Cat 4 strength, the scientists simulated landfall by cutting off the supply of moisture from beneath. That's when they found that even though each simulated storm made landfall at the same intensity, the ones that developed over warmer waters, well, they took more time to weaken. If these trends continue, it could make hurricanes even more costly. They're already one of the costliest natural disasters in North America. And with a busy season already meaning around 3 hurricanes that enter into Atlantic Canadian waters each year, a warming world will mean the potential for greater impact on our Canadian communities, even a few hundred kilometers inland. The researchers now plan to study hurricane data from other regions of the world to determine whether this trend is occurring around the globe. So stay tuned. And now you're Science Smart. If you have a science question on your mind, send me a tweet. I'll try to get it answered.
Yeah, it's an interesting study, Joe, and I understand there's still, 10 days or so left in hurricane season? Anything to be concerned about still?
I just checked the National Hurricane Center, and there is no forecasted development in the Atlantic Basin. But yeah, we should have been done this season about 4 months ago. So fingers crossed we make it to the end. Yeah, without any more storms, with waters still very warm. And I will definitely keep you posted. We are tracking a classic fall setup here on the West Coast, as we mentioned earlier. Take a look at the satellite again, satellite and radar. We're seeing things begin to fill in through eastern sections of Metro Vancouver. Some good rain headed out towards the Tri-Cities, Abbotsford, and Chilliwack in the next hour or so. So we've got more showers on tap as the low pressure system continues to spin in rounds. Notice off to the west, a bigger system approaching Haida Gwaii. That is what will bring continued rain through Friday, giving us a bit of an extra punch to wind out the week. Let's see if we can time it out for you. So wet weather to kick off your Friday. I do think we'll see some breaks, but as you've probably noticed, this kind of setup very hard to pinpoint exactly when we get the showers and when we might see some breaks in between the rounds of rain. Definitely looking at some breaks though as we head into Saturday. I think that's probably our driest day over the next 5-day forecast. Showers to return for Sunday, and I've got to keep them in the forecast through Monday and Tuesday before we get into a bit of a pattern change, which we'll talk more about. Fresh snow for much of the province. I know we heard from Tina earlier on in the show that travel to skiing and snowboarding is now not recommended, but we are getting a lot of fresh powder, both for the coastal mountains and the interior. If you're up in Kitimat, Terrace, or Stewart, an extra 5 to 10 centimeters tomorrow. And if you need some good news after all the announcements today, it is a La Nina year, so fresh snowfall should be in abundance even as we head into the new year. Looking at the forecast tomorrow across the province, I've got a lot of sunny icons in through the interior, starting the day off with some flurries for places like Kamloops and Kelowna, but we should see some sun before the end of the day. Pretty windy tonight as well in the southern interior. Prince George and up towards the Peace, some very cold wind chills. I think in Fort St. John, you'll wake up to a -30 tomorrow. Our temperatures are pretty seasonal, though look for a little cool down on Sunday. There's the break on Saturday. That's as good as I could do for high confidence in sunshine. It's a dry looking Saturday at least. Showers to return Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, but then we get into the pattern change. Mike, it looks like high pressure will bring back the cool and clear weather. And I think by the time we hit Wednesday, we will definitely be ready for a pattern change. So I'll keep you posted on that one.
Pattern change, good. All right, Joe, thanks very much. You're back with us
You're welcome.
after the break when we're going to be talking about one of the holiday's most iconic decorations that's arrived at its destination. A little worse for wear, but with a surprise inside. We'll show you what workers found next.
Hi, I'm Mark Conley, and welcome to CBC's Rink Checker, where we talk about some of the people who are making the ice in your neighborhood. Now, the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues usually has a prize every year for the first community that opens their rink. And year after year, here at Roslyn Community League, they win that award. Unfortunately, that's not happening this year because of COVID, but we still wanted to feature some of the people who are making the ice in your neighborhood.
Hey, I'm Curtis Zachuck. I make the ice at Roslyn Community League. The ice that we have is, I would say, the best in the city. Having the Olympia ice resurfacer is 300% better. You can put on just that little bit of, that little layer of ice. We're lucky because we have hot water. So hot water is just like an indoor arena, but outdoors. I wanted to think of something different because kids were coming out and they were playing with pucks and sticks, and we didn't want that. And that's what the big rink is for. So, but yet we wanted the kids to be able to come and skate. So we decided, now that we have the ice resurfacer, it's way easier to do something like this. You just can't bring out a hose and do this because there's angles and slants and the water doesn't stay.
This is a prototype of the new food asset map for Charlottetown. There's still some tweaking to do, but eventually residents will be able to use the map to help them find where local food can be grown, prepared, shared, or bought.
What's really important is that it's an interactive tool that people can visualize, and the map serves that purpose really well. So, people can go on and they can select different categories, they can select different city wards.
Crystal says residents will be able to find rentable commercial kitchens, emergency food programs such as food banks and soup kitchens, community gardens, and farmers markets. Bernie Plourde manages the Charlottetown Farmers Market. He's also chairperson of the Charlottetown Food Council, the group producing the food asset map.
I think people will be
pleasantly surprised to see that we have a lot of resources in Charlottetown that we don't always necessarily think of and we don't access.
Charlottetown City Council passed a food charter in 2019, and one of its goals is promoting more local, healthy food.
We've rediscovered just how important it is, not only to support, local and eating locally, but how good the food is in this province.
Other municipalities in Canada, including Toronto and Vancouver, are already using food asset maps. Crystal says the Charlottetown map was supposed to be ready sooner, but community consultations in March were put on hold because of COVID-19. Now, she says, the map is more important than ever.
One thing that COVID and the pandemic have shown us is that our system is fragile, and that it's really important to identify the strengths and the connections in there, and
CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day is going to look a bit different this year, but it's still in support of an important cause, local food banks across BC. Join us online and on Radio 1, December 4th.
So, Mike, the people need to know. What is your stance on when holiday directions should go up? Decorations.
Yeah, I am steadfastly and vigorously opposed to anything going up in November. I fear I may lose that battle this year, but no, I need to see the calendar flip, and we are just over a month away from Christmas. And Joe, nothing says happy holidays like the world-famous Rockefeller Center tree going up in New York City. Yes, here's a look at this year's Christmas tree. It traveled more than 240 kilometers from upstate New York to the heart of the city, but got crushed along the way, leaving many on social media to draw comparisons to the Charlie Brown Christmas tree.
Yeah, wah, wah. But it did come with a little surprise, a stowaway, actually. Someone who apparently really wanted to see the big city.
Wow.
This Sahuet owl was found clinging to the tree, and he's had a long week. Caretakers say it looks like he didn't have anything to eat or drink during his 3-day journey to the Big Apple.
Very cute. Don't worry, though. He's now staying at a wildlife center, getting all the mice he can eat. They say he's doing great, and once the vets get the okay, he'll be released back into the wild. His caretakers have even given him a name, and that would be Rockefeller.
Rockefeller.
Yes.
Never seen anything like this, where he probably was trapped in when they tied it up and started to transport it. But the fact that he's in such great shape as he is, it's wonderful.
Wonderful indeed. Very, very, very cute. Nice to see.
That is a true Christmas miracle.
Yes, it is. It is. All right, we're going to leave you tonight with some shots just taken a little while ago from St. Paul's Hospital, the Lights of Hope being unveiled there. Enjoy the evening. Dan's here at 11. Thanks for watching.